Welcome to educator.com. In this lesson we will be subtracting rational numbers. You will learn about subtracting integers, fractions, and decimals. Some applications for this would be to compare measurements and to find remaining amounts. Vocabulary for this lesson is the least common denominator. You need to find the least common denominator when adding and subtracting fractions. This means the smallest denominator that both or more than two fractions can share. You need to make the denominators of fractions the same before you can work with their numerators. Let's try subtracting with unlike denominators. If I have 5 over 9 minus 3 over 5, the 9 and the 5 must become a common denominator. They can both be 45. 9 times 5 will give you 45, so to be equivalent on top, 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 9 is 45, so to be equivalent on top, 3 times 9 is 18. And now we can work with the numerator since the denominators are the same. 25 minus 18 is 7 over 45. And 7 over 45 cannot be simplified, so we'll just leave it at that. 3 over 4 minus 7 over 8. The denominators can both be 8. So in this case, 4 times 2 is 8, and 3 times 2 is 6. This bottom one here already has the correct denominator, so 7 over 8. 6 minus 7 is negative 1 over 8. Remember to use your rules of adding and subtracting integers, because you'll be treating the 6 and the 7 as though they are integers once the denominators are the same. Let's try subtracting rational numbers, so a mixture of fractions along with decimals. I'm going to take 23 over 4 and subtract 3.5. But first I'm going to make 3.5 into a fraction. 3 is my whole number out front, and 5 over a fraction bar is in the 10th place value, 1, 0, 10. So I could simplify that to 3 divided by 5 divided by 5 and 1/2. So now I'm looking at 23 over 4 minus 3.5. Well, we have no whole number out front here, but I do see that this is an improper fraction. So I'm also going to change this into an improper fraction. 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. So I have 23 over 4 minus 7 over 2. Now I need to make the denominators the same. They can both be 4. So I'm going to leave this top the same, and on the bottom I'm going to multiply by 2. So negative 14 over 4. 23 minus 14 is 9, and the denominator is 4. And the positive value was larger, so my answer is going to be positive. You can see which form your book or your teacher prefers. Sometimes you could leave it improper, or perhaps it's preferred that you change it into a mixed number, and in this case 4 goes into 9 twice with a remainder of 1. So that would be 2 and 1/4. Let's try this one by changing the fraction into a decimal. 3, the numerator, divided by the denominator 4. It doesn't go in, but it will go in here 7 times 28, and will go into 20 perfectly 5 times. So as a decimal, 3 over 4 is 0.75. So now I have 11.7 minus 0.75. Make sure that you line your decimals up. Do not line up the digits, but line up the decimal. So we can fill in a 0 here. 10 minus 5 is 5. I borrowed, so 16 minus 7 is 9. And I borrowed, so 10 minus 0 is 10. Let's come back and estimate and make sure we're doing this correctly. 11.7 is about 12, and 3 over 4 is about 1. 12 minus 1 is about 11, and 10.95 is indeed about 11. Let's try subtracting rational numbers and word problems. One puppy weighs 6 1/8 pounds. Another puppy weighs 6.25 pounds. How much more does the heavier puppy weigh? Well, first we need to compare the fraction to the decimal to find out which one is heavier. I'm going to change this 1/8 into a fraction. And then I'm going to later change it into a decimal. I'm going to change the 1/8 into a decimal. So 1/8 doesn't go in. It'll go into 10 once. It'll go into 20 twice. And it'll go into 40 5 times. Perfectly. So this first puppy weighs 6.125 pounds. The second puppy weighs 6.25 pounds. So I can see that the second puppy is the heavier. And how much heavier? Let's take 6.25 and subtract 6.125. Fill in the 0 here. 10 minus 5 is 5. We borrowed. 4 minus 2 is 2. And 2 minus 1 is 1. So the second puppy, the heavier one, weighs 0.125 pounds more. Let's change this into a fraction. 6.25. 6 is the whole number. I have 25, 2 places, 2 zeros over 100. I can simplify this by dividing by 25. So it's 6 1/4. Now, 6 1/4 and 6 1/8, I need to have same denominators. So I'm looking at an 8 and a 4. They can both be 8. So I'm going to multiply by 2 and multiply by 2. So I have 2 over 8. So now I can see that this 6 2/8 is larger than the 6 1/8. So I can subtract 6 2/8 minus 6 1/8. 2 minus 1 is 1 over 8, and 6 minus 6 is 0. So I can either say the second puppy is 0.125 pounds heavier, or the second puppy is 1/8 pounds heavier. Let's try subtracting some more fractions with unlike denominators. 5 over 6 minus 5 over 9. 6 and 9 can both be 18. Maybe your first thought was to say 54, but remember that if you can work with the lowest common multiple or the lowest common denominator, it makes simplifying at the end easier. 6 times 3 is 18, so 5 times 3 is 15. 9 times 2 is 18, so 5 times 2 is 10. And we're subtracting. 15 minus 10 is 5, and you keep the denominators the same. And this fraction cannot be simplified. So in simplest form, 5 over 18. Let's try 8 and 4 over 7s, subtracting 2.7. 4 over 7 could be changed into a decimal. So let's try that. It doesn't go in. It'll go into 40. 7 times 5 is 35, so that's going to be our closest. And it'll go into 57 times, that's 49. We'll go into 10 once. So it looks like I'm not going to have a perfect decimal, or it's going to take some time. So let's just change this one into a fraction instead. Remember that working with fractions can give you a exact answer because you do not have to cut off any decimals or have repeating decimals. So this is going to be 2 and 7, 1 decimal place, so over a 10. It's in the tenths. And 8, 4 over 7. So now I need to make the 7 and the 10 the same. So right off the bat, I know that they can both be 70. So I multiplied by 10, so on top I'm going to multiply by 10, and I get 40. And then 2, I'm going to multiply by 7 and times 7, and I get 49. All right, so usually we would just say 8 minus 2, and then 40 minus 49. But notice that 40 is not big enough to take away 49. So we're going to borrow from the whole number. I'm going to borrow 1 whole from the 8, leaving me with 7. And that 1 whole that I take out is going to be 70 over 70. Because what's 70 over 70? It's 1. So that's the 1 whole that I just took out of this 8, leaving me with 7, but an extra fraction now. So let's take 70 plus the 4 that was there before. And that will now give me the new numerator of 110. You could think about it in the case of a pizza. If you took 1 pizza out and cut it up into more slices so that you could serve more people. So we borrowed 1 pizza from the 8 and cut it up into extra slices so that now we can subtract or feed the second group of people. Let's work with our whole number. 7 minus 2 is 5, and 110 minus 49. 10 minus 9 is 1, and we borrowed, so 10 minus 4 is 6. So 110 minus 49 is 61 over 70. So in subtracting fractions, you could either change both fractions. In subtracting fractions with decimals, you could either change both numbers to decimals. However, sometimes you may not get an exact answer, or change both into fractions. In this part, it was a little tough because we needed to also understand how to borrow from the whole number. It rained 4 3/5 inches in the first 3 months of this year. It did not rain again until November. If the rainfall totaled 7.8 inches after November rain, how much did it rain in November? So 4 3/5 inches in the first 3 months of this year. It did not rain again until November. And in November, the total rainfall was 7.8 inches. So this is what we don't know, the rain in November. And this is the rain in the first 3 months. And this is the total. So let's call what we don't know here N for rain in November. So 4 3/5 plus N equals 7.8. I'm going to take this 3/5 and make it into a decimal so that I can work with all the rational numbers being in the form of decimals. 5 doesn't go into 3, but it will go into 30 perfectly 6 times. So my decimal out front now is 4.6 plus the amount of rain in November would give me the total rain up until that point, which is 7.8. Now to solve, I'm going to take the opposite of adding 4.6 and subtract 4.6. N equals 8 minus 6 is 2, and 7 minus 4 is 3. So in November, the amount of rain was 3.2 inches. You have a 14-foot piece of ribbon you are using to decorate your house. If you cut a 4 4/5 piece for the kitchen and then a 3 3/4 piece for the dining room, how much will you have left for the living room? So let's take our number 14 and subtract 4 4/5 ribbon. And then we're also going to be subtracting 5 3/4 from the ribbon. Let's start off by just subtracting these two numbers. So 14 minus 4 4/5. I'm going to borrow from the 14, leaving 13 feet. And the one that I've borrowed, I'm going to make into 5 over 5. I've chosen 5 over 5 because the denominator on the second fraction is a 5, and this will make it easier to work with. 5 minus 4 is 1, keeping the same denominator, and 13 minus 4 is 9. So after we've cut out a piece for the kitchen, we have 9 1/5 left. Now let's cut out the piece for the dining room, minus 5 3/4. The denominators can both be 20 here. So 5 times 4 will give me 20, and 1 times 4 will give me 4. On top I have 9, and 5, and 4 times 5 will give me 20, and 3 times 5 will give me 15. Well, the 4 is not big enough to take away the 15, so let's borrow 8 left over, 8 whole, and then 20 new pieces plus the 4 from before now gives me 24. 24 minus 15 is 9 over 20, and 8 minus 5 is 3. So we have 3 9/20 feet of ribbon left over for the living room. Let's check our answer. 14 minus about 5 is 9, and 9 minus about 5 is 4, if we're estimating. Another 5 leaves me with 14. So we start out with 14 whole minus about 5 would give us 9, and then minus about, I would say that would be closer to 6, would leave us with about 9 minus 6 is 3. So we have about 3 left over, and that is close to our exact answer. So we have an idea that our answer is in the correct range. And remember with word problems that you need to include your unit. And in this case, we were talking about feet of ribbon, so we have 3 9/20 feet of ribbon left.